This leaked footage was very hard to listen to. Now, you can skip ahead to just watch the footage, look at the timestamps if you want to. But it's just some quick thoughts. I was in conversation. It gave me so much to think about. And sometimes what happens when you see somebody who's famous go through something that would be ostensibly difficult, you just forget that they're a human being. You forget that the person in front of the screen, behind the camera, or whatever it is, actually has feelings, has desires, has insecurities, has fears, has attachments. And Daniel is the same. In fact, he seems like a very sensitive and emotional person. He often wears his emotions on his sleeve. I can't believe that back then when I was young and dumb, and even recently when I was thinking about it, I just didn't humanize Daniel and didn't even take into consideration that this was one of the times where somebody's been deeply hurt by Doug. Now, Doug and Daniel have, since this footage, had a back and forth communication. Daniel actually kind of almost acted as his therapist, and Doug really opened up about how he had been hurt in his childhood and how that might have affected his relationship with Daniel and how he acts in the sphere in general. So there's definitely some introspection happening. And I just want to say, a lot of people are ganging up on Doug right now, and I don't like it. I don't like it. It's important to speak truth to power. And what's kind of happened is that, there's been this big bully that's been walking around the playground for a few years, just punching people in the face. And they've been like, okay, I guess I get punched in the face. And then it took like one or two of us to stand up and be like, stop punching me in the face, bro. And maybe make a couple of memes about it. And then the other people that have been punched in the face are like, actually, I also don't want you to punch me in the face. And some people are like, whoa, that's just too much. Stop saying that you don't want to be punched in the face. Come on, guys, that's an overreaction. But there is some validity to the point that people are starting to gang up on Doug, and I don't want that. I don't want people to have this kind of mob mentality. I don't want people to harass him. I think Doug has a huge place in the poker community, and in fact, in the comments below, leave something positive about Doug. Fuck it. Let's just create some kind of positive atmosphere, something you like about him. Even if you don't like the whole of him, even if you don't like his actions or condone his actions, I really want to make sure that we're being fair to somebody and giving them a path to redemption. So I hope you enjoy the footage. Peace.
I think that the Daniel thing is a really good thing to bring up, and I'd be curious of your take on this, because I think mine's a little bit unique. So one of the pushbacks I had when Doug was pitching the idea of us doing a one-on-one type of podcast was, I think it would be impossible to have a good faith debate because he has no respect for me as a professional and I have no respect for him as a person. And the Daniel is the example that everybody points to of like, look, these guys hashed it out and now they're friendly. The issue I have with that, and why I understand why it happened and I understand like how they got to this point, but the problem I have is that when push came to shove, all of the attacks that Doug made on Daniel were character assassinations. He really went hard after who Daniel was as a person. He went after his integrity in this community as a long-standing 25-plus year vet. He questioned his motives as far as being a man of the company rather than a man of the people. He questioned his character, shaming him for a previous blackface video and things of that nature. And when the dust all settled and he lost $1 million, Doug shook his hand and said, I really have a lot of respect for you getting in the arena with me, implying that all of those things that he disrespected him on, he wasn't sorry for. But instead, he was sorry that he dragged a fellow competitor that he now respects because Daniel stepped up to the plate, played high-stakes poker, and lost $1 million. Those two things are not the same in my view at all.
I think he had respect to him at the beginning of the challenge. I don't think it was just at the end. I think when they played live, you saw that. Daniel had his hatred of him. Daniel was on MySpace for the whole time with me, and he actually.
But again, we're still just talking like on a professional level, right? Like he never, to my knowledge, publicly apologized for all of the character attacks, all of the attacks on his integrity. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Daniel is one of the most precious items that we have in this community when it's all said and done. I know he gets a lot of shit, and I know that, he's as fallible as the rest of us. But when we look around and we look at icons in this industry, he's the only long-standing guy that we can really point to and say, like, by and large, this man is doing it right, and he's still among us, right? Like, he doesn't flaunt his PJs and go play up in Silicon Valley like Helmuth. He doesn't disappear into the triad like Ivy. He's an everyman, and he has always been that. And I think that like it's really a crime against the community to drag him through the mud and torture him for 2 to 3 years, building a brand off of this sort of destruction, all to have it come to a head in a competition where he says, "Hey, I know I gave you a lot of shit, man, but it took a lot of guts to step up and play me in my discipline. Respect." That's very shallow in my opinion. I don't think that it's the same as saying like, "Look, man, I recognize everything you've accomplished over your career. I'm really sorry that I absolutely belittled you in front of the public on my massive platform that I essentially built off of your back."
So here's a question for you,
Look
Berkey.
who's here real quick. I guess Daniel's coming up, so I guess it's a good spot to let Bro cook. Daniel, what you got for
So I
us?
was listening in to Berkey, and thanks for the kind words first and foremost, and
We love you. We
appreciate
love
it.
you
I've
over here.
been sort of really, Charlie. I don't know if you're here still, but like I just want to say, like a lot of the things you've said
He's here.
have really kind of opened my eyes too about and sort of reminisced about when I was going through that. Right. So essentially, what happened with me was I was doing an interview talking about a supernova thing and like high reg rakeback situation that's like was dangerous long term, and I was right because it failed. Right. Eventually, it all fell apart, and then within that part, like 30-minute conversation, I was talking about have like essentially high rake games, right? And I used 4 words within that. More rake is better, right? We all remember this. There was nothing said after. There was no like in every video he did. There was no context given. Every time I tried to explain myself, and the one thing that I want to identify with Charlie on in this is when Charlie said you know, like no one stood for him really when this was happening. I didn't even know, honestly, until recently about this pedophile thing. I really didn't. I had no idea. Um, but I felt the same way, right? When, like you said, I've been in the community. My integrity's always never been in question, and what I want for the game. And I've been a player my whole life. And like essentially what happened was 4 words characterized me as this evil monster corporate shill who is the enemy of poker and the enemy of poker players. And it was like you said, it was calculated. It was designed and it worked, and unfortunately it worked. And I'm seeing that same formula play out, and obviously my case is like not even 1/10 of 1% of the what Charlie had to deal with in like being essentially, called one of the worst possible things you can, and twisting in that way. And I like I said, I get it, and I'm hearing everyone talk about the many things, and it does bring back a lot of memories. Is essentially I was like the OG, right? I mean, I was the first big takedown, if you will, where I didn't. And here was the thing that really started to upset me in the media. Everyone says, "Oh, they got to stop with the back and forth," and I swear to you, I looked and I'm like, in a year and a half, I said one tweet once and never mentioned his name. And I wasn't even like having a back and forth, but the media twisted it as, oh, these two. What? I'm the one that's just taking the shit and I tried to be above it because I didn't want to like stoop because I figured, that was the goal. And that puts people in a difficult position. Berkey's in that seat all the time now, it seems like, right? Because he is up there and like he has 2 choices, either engage, right? Like be in the mud with these people or ignore. When you ignore, then the characterization of who you are is what stands and you have no defense against it. So that was probably one of the most difficult times of my life because I went against what I wanted to get in there and fight and be in the mud. But again, then I'd be dirty and filthy. But instead, unfortunately, it was effective. Some people today still say to me, "Hey, I really liked you until you said more rake is better." I'm like, "Holy fuck!" And I try to talk to these people. I'm like, you understand? It's like, but it's futile, right? Because it was a very effective campaign. It worked, and I think once that worked so well, you see the formula. It's imprinted in your brain, and you continue to do it, and you do it on a different scale. Like in the case with Charlie, I think it's far worse than any other one of them. For me anyway. I just want to say thanks for bringing it up, Berkey, because I've been listening, and yeah, that's it.
Man, it really is a damned if you do, damned if you don't spot. Because if you do say something, you're stooping to the people that are talking shit about you. But if you don't, you let the person with the biggest platform just use his platform to belittle you as much as he possibly wants. So you can't have both fucking sides. you, you just
I'm
can't.
kind of curious, Daniel. What was your ultimate like takeaway when it was all said and done after the whatever you guys shook it out and kind of like made peace? Like, is there any validity to the kind of things I'm saying where it's one of those things where it's like, sure, he respects you as a competitor, but like, was there ever any remorse for what he did to your rep?
Uh, so there was never anything public, right? When we
Right.
played the feud, essentially, to be honest with you, I learned one of the biggest lessons from that too. And this is part of what I've been saying on a couple spaces before about reaching out to people privately, because I know looking back that I could have stopped the whole thing by handling it like a real adult and just reach out to him privately and say, hey, can we talk? Right. And just talk privately, because I really do think if I would have done that as someone of stature in the community at the time, and him wanting to make a name for himself, and him admittingly saying that, he looked up to me, right? When
Mm-hmm.
when he started in the game. So now I remember the first time he had a beef with me, he did one of his things where he did a video where he called it Jason Mercier cheating allegations, right? In all
Yeah, I
caps. And
remember
I'm
this.
like, what the fuck, right? When it had nothing. So when someone sees that, it's clickbait, and they're like, oh my God, what did Jason do? When in reality, it wasn't about Jason. It was Jason didn't want to play a guy open face because he thought maybe the guy was cheating. But nobody sees past that, right? So I sort of took issue with that. And I think what I found with Doug is when he's challenged in any way for any reason, he's willing. And this is part of what Charlie talked about too, which is like people, it's easier to just ignore it and be like, fuck, I don't want to get in that because I'm next, right? And not everybody has the propaganda machine in the arm of somebody as talented as Thomas, who will put a gif of a dildo going down your throat, like, and have it up in 3 minutes, right? Like, not everybody has that arm. So I think for most people, it's easier to just go, you know what, fuck it, I quit, man. Like, I don't want in. But yeah, but we did. But privately, like on the thing, it really came down to me just saying, you know what, I don't want the drama no more. I'll be the quote unquote bigger man and speak to him civilly and cordially. He he didn't apologize for the majority of it. I think he apologized like for, randomly throwing in the 20-year-old like blackface video in one of his things and said like, he crossed the line in that regard. But the sentiment that the sentiment that you have is pretty on point, I think.
He also called Mercier a bad rag. Rude.
Well, that's whatever, that's like shit talk, but
Yeah, of
you
course.
can say, listen, I think you suck at poker, but like to do a title like that was the first one, like I said. And then again, the more rake is better thing was like, it got so out of hand, like, and I just wasn't responding. And I talked to the people around me. I'm like, I want to get in there, I want to fight, but I've been in this game for a long time to know that like, you never come out. Like that's what I felt a lot of empathy for Berkey when he went into that arena. Cause I'm like, no one's going to come out looking good, but somehow Berkey, I think you did, I think you're going to win some money, which is nice for you. And also I think you've earned the respect of a lot of people who, saw you stand up to the bullies and win.
Yeah, it's the weird
Yeah.
thing for Matt. Like, I guess from what we've seen, or like what I've gotten from having more of like the spicier Twitter game, like when I just call people on some bullshit that's just empirically lies. People then say, "Oh, but aren't you just bullying the bullies? And aren't you doing the thing that you don't want to be propagating?" And at what point you can't have it all? What are you supposed to do?
Yeah. I mean, as somebody who spent a lot of his childhood getting punched in the face, the recipe for this is abundantly clear. And it's like it's messy. People don't like to necessarily see it because it's not the most upstanding way to handle things. But you turn the other cheek until you just can't. And then at some point, you counterpunch. And I thought that was a really I saw you and Veronica kind of having that discussion, and I think reframing it as punch counterpunch is very critical. I don't know about everybody else, but like when you grow up in a small town with one stoplight, you learn how to fight at a young age, and one of the first things that you're taught by whatever male role model you have is never throw the first punch. And it's just like, it's a staple in your mindset. Uh, and there's almost kind of a lesson in that where it's you don't want to get your hands dirty. You don't want to be the one who stoops to a level of bullying, but when push comes to shove and somebody engages a fight with you, you just have to, at some point in time, like, engage back.
Daniel, thoughts? I guess if you have any.
No, of course. I mean, like I said, it is the issue. It's hard when lying starts to happen, right? Like opinion-based stuff, when people say that, whatever, okay, you don't like me, that's fine. But then when like lies start to get out there and they start to become fact, right? Then you feel like you really don't have any choice, right? Like that's, I think, the pushing point. But maybe it should be earlier than that, right? But here's the issue, right? And this is what really, I guess, hurt and surprised me was how, like, and that's why I said I understand, like what Charlie felt. Like I felt like nobody was backing me in that, right? I was on my own. Like I was on my own, and like everyone's like, "Holy fuck," and they're laughing because it's funny. A lot of the videos were funny, haha, Morik is better, billboards or whatever. But like, I was surprised at how scared essentially the media was, how scared like other people were to say anything, to like defend me, if you will, or anything along those lines, because they didn't want to be next, and maybe that's something that we learned from all this in the biggest and best way. And I think that's what I'm hearing Charlie say repeatedly about what needs to happen here is like, we should, step forward and go, well, there has to be like some kind of legitimate end or consequences to it.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I can speak to this a little bit. Like, the amount of private support I've received over the last 6 years is endless. And it's by people who, like, one single tweet from them would be enough to move the needle. Whatever the fuck is going on this last 3 weeks, I don't know what has caused this change, but I've never seen so many high-profile people just, like, stand up for what is right and be, like, it's almost cool to be righteous right now. And I don't know what's created this. And I hope that it keeps going to some degree in our community. But like, I remember sitting back and watching I didn't know you very well at that point, Daniel. I don't even know if we had actually personally met, but I grew up following you as closely as anybody else, and it was weird. It was really weird. At that point, I had been playing for 16 years. It was weird to see a staple of the community just like get absolutely filleted. And we all kind of, we none of us were your peers, man. Like that was the thing is you were untouchable and you were a level above everybody else that we were still trying to climb to. The game has obviously changed now where there isn't that massive separation necessarily by the people who are playing at the highest levels and the rest of the community. But for the onlooker, it was very, very strange and jarring. And then, because you really didn't have a lot of peers in the social circles and in the public sphere, it was just crickets, man. Like, you got raked over the coals bad. To see a billboard was like, it was honestly like watching 4chan come to life. And I know, like, at that point, obviously at that point, I had already been getting dragged by Doug too. So, like, I kind of understood. But at that point, it was just like, man, this train isn't going to stop. Like,
I'd say one of the worst byproducts of it all, really, was I was always, much like you, outspoken when I saw things and injustices in poker, and whether it was the Full Tilt scandal, whatever the case may be, I was always one to think about, helping the players and all that. When that all happened, I felt like I lost my ability to speak on stuff, because anytime I would chime in, it would be like, oh, sure, the Morake is better guy, right? So it took me from a place in poker, which I really appreciated being in and I was thankful for, and I took it very seriously, in a quote unquote ambassadorial role, if you will. And as a result of the years and it was like multiple years smear campaign of my character and integrity and what I stand for and what I give a shit about. Like, I've never given a fuck about money. Like, people that know me know that, right? Like, I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't say things I don't believe because somebody's, got a paycheck in my ass. It's never going to be me, And so just losing that to a certain degree in terms of, like, I always felt like anytime I said something on something, if I said something that I saw in, say, some other poker organization doing something poorly, people would just go, oh, you're the Morake is better guy. Poker Stars did this, or whatever the case may be. So that was that was a very like frustrating byproduct. And I honestly think, and this is just my opinion, I think it was bad for poker when I did that, because, I always did try to stand up for what I thought was best for the game, and it basically stunted that.
I just want to jump in and say, back when that was happening, I was probably like 22, 23. And I was watching Doug's videos and I was enjoying them. And in the kind of, whatever the word is, like shouting for it in a kind of almost sadistic way, watching somebody else get dragged in a spot where I think it was really hard for me to humanize you, because you're like one of the heroes, you're like one of the people that's so far above, like Matt was saying. And just hearing you speak about it now, I'm only really realizing that, yeah, I mean, you were just being bullied, and it's such a weird thing to say because the power differential there. But from my perspective, it wasn't like that at all, and I was just kind of enjoying watching you get dragged. And I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't speak it out then. Not that it would have done too much, but I still should have done it, and so many people in the book community should have done that too.
Well, no, I really genuinely appreciate you saying that, because it hurt, man. Like, I'm not going to lie. It was painful to go through, feeling like I was part of a community, and this guy is shitting on me nonstop. I'm not saying anything back. But meanwhile, the media is like, oh, the feud between the two, as if I was slinging mud or doing anything like that. So hearing you speak and be vulnerable, what happened to you, it's sort of obviously very, very different. But it... and all of you who've experienced it, it really sort of hit home. Like, I went through, in my own way, traumatic experience of sort of losing what I've been a part of for 20 years.
I can hear you, and dude, I love you so much. You're such a nice person, man. You've always been good to me. I can hear you doing the same thing that I do. When I think and speak about what happened to me, I always underplay it. I'm always like, no, it wasn't that bad. Like, I'm actually a lot tougher than most people. I can handle it. But what happened to you it was terrible, man. It was like, especially knowing that you were bullied as a kid, and that you finally found this community that accepted you and embraced you, and you battled your way for decades to get to the top, and you were loved. And then to have that community turn its back on you for many years as somebody lied about you is a terrible thing to go through. And I hope that you don't underappreciate how tough you were to go through that and keep your head held high.
I appreciate that, Charlie. And yeah, my wife always has, I've always been resilient, and I knew I'd get through it, and I knew I'd be fine. I'm never going anywhere. I'm going to be in poker forever. But, that was a part of my life that was the hardest. And I'm like, again, and I think you too, Charlie, said this in one of your previous spaces. I look at it I'm thankful for it, because I learned so much about how moving forward I want to do business. Like, I don't think people know there's a lot of things that I do behind the scenes. I have conversations with people that never get public because I don't want to, put it out there. I think I'm more effective, actually getting really, important things done in that regard. But I appreciate all you guys that are in the fight every day and trying to fight for what's right, essentially. And it's cool to see, like, even though it's years later, I'm so proud of the community now and these spaces. Like, I've been on here I did one for 4 hours with Sean fucking Deeb. Like, me and him were hosting a thing together, and it was great, and I loved it. And so I feel really connected to everybody here, and I just love what I see with the podcast, with what Charlie's doing, putting out the positivity or the unconditional love in the world. Like, there's a lot of good here, guys. Like, I think all this crazy shit that happened a week ago with the stream was maybe the dropping the breaking point where it's like, what are we? And I think we're seeing like a lot of rainbows here.
Yeah, like at least the way that I see it personally is it's not like we need to quote unquote go out of our way to spread love and be kind to people, especially if like you don't that's not your style or your thing. But at the very least, having some form of tolerance and common decency shouldn't necessarily be something that's above and beyond, right? That's just the normal, good human thing to do. Where if someone's talking about facts or things that happened in your life that they want to bring up, and it's like they want to quote unquote drag you for it, it's like, yeah, these things happen. These things are true. You can't stop it. But when someone wants to start fabricating things or start twisting narratives for their own personal gain, at some point it's finally nice to see the community be like, nah, like we ain't gonna let this slide. Fuck that.
Right. Well,
Yeah, I mean,
I
pretty
wanted to
tough. Like,
say
go
one
for it,
thing.
Tom. Yeah, go for it.
I'm almost like crying over here. I just wanted to say thank you, Daniel, for sharing. And you were always my poker hero, so I can't even believe you're in here. So, and Berkey's making fun of me because I'm probably fangirling a little bit, but I think you're awesome no matter what he said. And thank you for sharing.
Well, I'm a fan too. I love your stuff. I told my wife, I said, she's cool. Because, we have our own views on different people in the game and what they're there for and all that. And my wife has an amazing read on people, and she's always said, you seem cool. So there's that.